Alrighty, hello everyone. I'm Eric Cox. I'm a member of the Net Capital team. Let's allow one moment for everyone to get settled. Thanks. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome again. I'm excited to welcome today Grady Buchanan with OmniValley. As always, this company is actively raising capital on the Net Capital platform. I have just added a link to that in chat. We're trying something new today. Coming to you live from Zoom and Clubhouse for the very first time. So thanks, Grady, for being flexible, trying something new, and thanks for everybody attending via Clubhouse. So for those who are in Clubhouse, it's kind of a new housekeeping item. You will be able to listen through the app, but I won't be able to keep track of live questions through that. We haven't set that up quite yet, but you can obviously go to netcapital.com/companies/OmniValley to learn more about this company, or you can indicate at netcapital.com. Once you register, create an account, you'll receive email notifications about the Zoom to be able to actually engage the Q&A functionality. And for those of us who are on Zoom, please do remember that please do use the Q&A functionality built into Zoom. There is chat function built into Zoom as well, but Q&A is definitely the easiest way to keep track of all the questions coming in and make sure that we get to as many of them as possible. And please do use it. We do want this conversation to be as interactive as possible. So with all that being said, I think that's all the housekeeping. Yes, I think that's everything. So come on in, Grady. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're building at OmniValley?
Yeah, sure. And apologies on the echo. I'm sure it's on my end. Tech founder. Yeah, so OmniValley, thanks, Eric, for having us on. But OmniValley itself, so it's an online vetted investor network connecting those who invest in venture capital funds or directly into startup companies. So our network houses individual angels, angel groups, accelerators, venture capital firms, corporate venture groups, all the way up to limited partners of all sizes, large endowments, foundations, state plans, family offices, and then, as I'm sure we'll get into, startup companies coming here soon. But really, we built this platform just having spent years within this industry. It's the majority of my background, but trying to deliver some connections from the coast all the way to the Midwest. So that's where we started. Obviously, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. Our ecosystem's small, but it's growing. We have a number of companies, a number of funds and investors finding local opportunities, and some pretty decent returns can be found here, and we're starting to realize them. But we didn't have an efficient way to connect our companies to the other investor sources or the downstream capital or some of those powerhouse ecosystems that we see on the coast. So OmniValley was a way to elicit some transparency and some access for other investors wanting to enter new markets, but it gives them the freedom in a peer network to share their emails, their phone numbers, their Calendly links, where, again, startup companies are not on that side of the platform. It's limiting for sure, but it makes it so investors have a place where they can actually come in and feel comfortable, gather some connections or some insight into new markets, and then take it from there. Is the long and short of OmniValley. So,
yeah, and one of the things, I think I'm about to thank you, perfect, Grady. One of the things I think that you touched on right there that is critically important. I spent some time in the Midwest supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystem as well. And there definitely is a disparity between, let's just say, the coasts and the rest of the country and the rest of the world, I guess, more broadly, in accessing capital. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, deeper into your background? And I know Zach is also a Badger as well, right? Why don't you tell us about the rest of the team?
Yeah, sure. So the rest of the team, sorry, I'm just going to keep unmuting and muting, Eric, so there aren't any echoes. Yes, I'm a Badger. You can probably see a little bobblehead over there. Proud Badger here. Obviously, didn't make it too far. Still in Madison, Wisconsin. But graduated here, economics degree. Went to Milwaukee for a bit, and then was in Chicago. And in Chicago is where I got my first experience into institutional investments. I was one of the naive ones that thought every venture capital fund just invested their own money because they're all super rich, right? That's honestly how I thought it worked. So wrong, obviously. But my clients down in Chicago were a lot of institutional investors. So like the Pepsi plan or Coca-Cola, obviously. And then one happened to be the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation up here in Madison, $3 billion endowment fund, small team at the time. I joined, I think in its heyday, we got up to 8 people. And again, my responsibilities were more the accelerator, venture capital, some local emerging manager investment initiatives. And that's, again, where I started to see this real need. It's like, okay, well, I'm from Wisconsin. I like what's going on here. Why don't we try to connect our portfolio and the folks that we're investing in, which are big names on the coast and globally, and say, hey, here's what's going on in Madison. Do you have an interest in coming here to Milwaukee, Green Bay, looking at what's going on in our ecosystem? And again, that's where we heard the same thing. It's, well, we don't have flights. I don't know Wisconsin's a state, whatever, like, whatever. And to be fair, our ecosystem's not like generating billions of dollars unicorns. We're not, our startup rankings are increasing, but they're not, the coast. And so it's fair, right? All of these kind of excuses, if you will. But the idea was to show them in a way where it's like, okay, let's put our portfolio online here. Let's put the accelerators in the market because they're kind of boots on the ground in smaller ecosystems in a lot of ways. And let's throw limited partners, having been a limited partner, let's see. And for limited partners on the phone, I think it's safe to say we're like the slowest moving things in the industry, and we adopt very little new technology. And usually our teams are kind of small too. So trying to navigate this world is tough. And usually VC funds are coming to us. But in order to grow our ecosystem, I think limited partners should be a little bit more involved. And that was the role we took, and why OmniValley spun out and created its own entity to really expand this globally and let every ecosystem have their spotlight. And so, yes, Zach Ante is our co-founder as well, in Madison, from Madison. And he met him in school, obviously, very great at process, organization, and details. So I live kind of in the clouds and talk a lot, and Zach keeps us grounded and makes sure he manages most of that stuff. So yeah, we came together, not his industry by any means, but you can kind of see that we have some startups here that aren't really prominently placed or exposed in the way that the coasts are. We're always talking about them and they're in every newsletter. It's like, well, we have companies here doing that. You're right, this could be a problem. And so Zach's been getting more involved, obviously, over the last couple of years, and now he knows what I know. But yeah, those are the two core team. And then obviously we brought on a programmer who's been able to build the platform that everybody can see today. I invite you all to try it out. It's totally free. And we were able to keep that in-house, which was pretty important to us as well. So.
Sorry, as my most trusted advisor trying to join the Zoom call here. There's some more Big Ten love on the team, right? I see Illinois and Minnesota. No Michigan yet, but we'll keep working on that. You want to tell us a little bit about John and Justin before we back up to 30,000 feet and talk about the problem solution?
Sure, and I should say, Eric, we don't discriminate against Michigan, even though we have. So Justin's actually a Badger too, and then he went and got his MBA up in Minnesota. His family's from up in Minneapolis, and he's been running a lot of our marketing. He's much more product oriented. He's a tech consultant and comes from that world, and now is currently in Chicago. Which is nice because it opens up, that market a little bit for us. And he's very, very network savvy and active there. John went to Illinois, our programmer, our CTO currently. He graduated with, I think, molecular biology or something completely related to what we're doing. But self-taught programmer, started working at some tech firms in Chicago, did some ancillary projects on the side, and he really liked that. And when we had gone out and said, all right, we need someone with the mean stack, we need somebody that knows exactly what's already built here. And John was perfect. It's just kind of where his experience was. And then in order to help John, because programming is one thing, growing the team's totally separate, we brought on a serial entrepreneur over in Milwaukee, CTO, couple of good companies he's got, and then one that's in the market again today. But we were very fortunate to have his time and have him as an advisor so he can help mentor those initiatives and then also grow that team when this raise goes well. And then our other advisor is from Capital Innovators, which is went through the accelerator program with them. They're a St. Louis based organization, obviously accelerator, 90 plus portfolio companies. They've been around for a while. And then Henry Chi, their portfolio manager, is also an advisor on our team that helps. He's got a legal background too. So a lot of what we do, we need to be SEC compliant despite it being a free platform. We need to have the vetted tools in there. And so he's been very helpful with all of that. And so, yeah, the core group is really 6 of us, I like to say now.
Yeah, and growing. That's beautiful. And so, take a step back for a moment. Great to hear about the team and the product in general. Tell us a little bit about how big is this problem for those who have never tried to raise capital in the Midwest or haven't talked to LPs and funds in outside of the coast. So talk to us about kind of the metrics behind the problem.
Yeah, I think, metrics aside, because they're a little bit tough. But if we think about today's world, and I'll work backwards, because obviously OmniValley did not start to service the virtual world. We'd have to be fortunate, but in any event, the virtual world today, the problem that we see, which is why our messaging has shifted a little bit. We always had intentions of helping local startups and helping investors. It all stems to the investors, right? Helping investors be able to promote their portfolio companies or even local companies that they're working with that they might not be invested in. But, if it's outside of Milwaukee's a decent sized hub, but does anybody know there's other cities outside of Milwaukee? There are. And so in the virtual world, it's been increasingly tough for a lot of our members and a lot of other investors out there to actually expose their portfolio companies. Think like the demo days, right? Demo days are pretty important to the local ecosystems. It's great. Zoom works fine, but you do miss that networking. You do miss that look and feel of a lot of things. But other than that, it was really meant to combat those issues here. Again, in the virtual world, was a way to say, okay, now you have portfolio company issues as well. It's not just investors trying to connect into new markets. We're just battling time zones at this point. So let's make it accessible and create a two-way mirror for startup companies. That's the newest thing that's being launched, the startup profiles, minimal data, easy to connect. And then on the investor side, why we originally started this is because the problem, and it's still very close than it was a couple of years ago, but almost, over 2/3, close to 3/4 of the funding in venture for startups goes to San Francisco, New York, and Boston, or those large coastal epicenters, which, and I should say, I think they'll always be epicenters. I just think they'll become a little less relevant over time, not in a bad way, just because we have other markets out there, but that was happening. And what I saw is okay, out of our total addressable market, which is, every venture fund, accelerator programs, angel investors, you do the math, very simply, less than 20% of our total market actually reside, including startup companies, resides on where that 3/4 of the venture funding happens. And I was okay, well, problem or not, everybody else deserves exhibition and exposure, and the access that we can provide, I think, again, it gets rid of some of these excuses or some of these lines around the corner for some of these larger venture funds, which, again, they don't have in this world, but in the past they did. Again, totally fine. They don't need to look here. But for the firms operating here that are finding companies that are kind of scout teams for large firms, like it or not, this was a place for large firms to come in and say, okay, I don't have to talk to the startups, but maybe Eric's in Nebraska today and he knows about Nebraska's ecosystem. I want to talk to Eric as an investor peer and see what's going on there. So I think the biggest problem we're solving is that the streamlining of efforts, right? It's not so much investors don't want to come here. They haven't really had the need to. They can generate returns and startup companies move to where they are, smart. But if you don't, and you actually want to look outside of a market, and maybe it's for new opportunity, maybe the valuations are better, whatever it may be, or you just want to differentiate yourself for your own limited partner investors. I only look in South Dakota. How do I actually break into that market and streamline my efforts to actually market myself there or to learn about the ecosystem? That's historically been pretty tough. So very insular networks, soft intro after soft intro might get you there. But again, super tough. LinkedIn is the tool for that, and that's fine. But let's beachhead it in a way and make this industry specific in venture and address the problem of we don't invest in different geographies because we don't have connections there. We don't know what's going on. It's all right, well, now you do. And so let's figure this out. and like what, like a third of the companies are helped by the virtual world or something. We definitely were in a way, because now it's, everyone in San Francisco wants to connect to the Midwest. Everyone in Tel Aviv wants to connect to Australia for some reasons that are unknown to me. But watching the global platform kind of work in that way, it's like, all right, in the virtual world, all we're doing, like I said, is fighting against time zones. So it doesn't matter, Eric, you and I could be across the street. We're not. Your weather looks way better there. But if we were, we'd still be on a Zoom call like this. And so that's kind of the difference. And it's like, desktop diligence is now a thing, and limited partners, we have to get behind that too, because our venture funds know it. And it's like, okay, that means they could invest in North Carolina being located in St. Louis. It doesn't really matter. And it might still be on thesis for them and a little uncomfortable, but hopefully there's an ecosystem there that can make that company work better. And that's where OmniValley can teach some of that stuff, and give exposure to what's going on, and then access that ecosystem. So I think the problem's certainly still there. I mean, our industry is not immune to the virtual world for sure, but I think a platform like this can help. And I think it can help. Again, it's not my job to tell people where to invest. I just want to expose what else is out there, because I think every ecosystem deserves a spotlight. But if you pass over it, as long as you saw it, again, it's your discretion. You're the investor. Do whatever you want, or take any intros you want it. And no fault to you, no fault to the person getting the intro, or to us. We're just there to highlight things.
Yeah, no, I think that's thanks. No, I think that's really, really important and very interesting. I know on your offering page you highlight select cities and the multiple on invested capital in those cities, and I think that's really interesting. I think the way that you say it, we think the coasts have their place in venture capital, obviously, and they likely always will. And nobody's trying to discredit that or really kind of undermine that. But Net Capital is headquartered in Boston. I'm here in Southern California. Spent some time in the Bay Area, spent some time in Ann Arbor and Detroit. When you talk about multiples on invested capital, the Bay Area is looking at 4.2x according to PitchBook in 2019. Boston's looking at 3.6x. New York 4.4. But these kind of Chicago should always be a big player in the space. And you talk about a 5.6x return on capital invested, and it's hard to understand why investors from the coast haven't been able to, outside of, I guess, weather and time zones, haven't been able to access that deal flow and communicate with people. Seattle 4.8x, Austin 3.3. So talk to us a little bit about why now in the virtual world, and the solution that you're providing for LPs to get these intros. Where do you see the OmniValley product developing over time, in the kind of new COVID reality?
Yeah, and it's a good question too. And I have my own opinions as to why people aren't investing in the Midwest. And look, every investor is different, right? Like they invest on thesis, off thesis, but most of them report to larger limited partners, which they've told a strategy to. Like when we sit there and we hear it from venture friends, like, okay, I know what these guys are going to do. They make sense in my portfolio, or I know what she's doing down in Austin. They make sense in our portfolio. And that makes sense, and we expect them to do that. So if they start to go off thesis, we have questions, which does kind of keep them out of the Midwest for the most part, if they're not a Midwest-focused manager. So, but now you start to see it's more agnostic. People are more, I invest in all of North America. I have no real caps, and that's, of course, because of the virtual world, it makes it easier. But I think what I see kind of in the future, and what OmniValley and what I want OmniValley to be able to deliver is, again, like true, I don't want to say the word premier because I don't really know what that word means, but true access to an ecosystem, right? Like, so if you're in Milwaukee, we have some ecosystem builders on the platform from Milwaukee, we have venture funds, but we have people there that know the ecosystem well. So what if we launch something, and I say what if because we're still planning a lot of this stuff out, but what if it's ecosystem reports that are driven and inputted by our actual members? So think of like a Wikipedia page that you could actually edit and update. Eric in Los Angeles could still update it if he came to Milwaukee, if he had access to do so. So living documents that are updated pretty frequently, time-stamped, it gives the ability for you to land in an ecosystem, or for you to want to look at one. Again, if you don't need to interact with folks, okay, here are the popular meeting spots, some events coming up in Indianapolis, here's what's going on, here are the prominent venture folks, and here's who they've listed as their dominant companies, or maybe here are the companies that nobody's looking at. Whatever's on those reports, I think that probably not going to move a limited partner, but it's good transparency for us, I think. But it will move venture funds, and it will make them, it'll entice them at least, maybe I should be looking here, or if I'm not, great, it's no harm to me. But the transparency in this market is super lacking, and it's lacking purposefully so, because there's a lot of words like proprietary and discretion like thrown out, which makes sense. I mean, it's kind of how it's always been. But to not share deals with other funds or to promote your companies, I think is a disservice to those. And I'm not naming names, but the ability to say, oh, well, they're super competitive right now does happen. But I want the transparency there. I want this industry to move a little bit faster. And more importantly, I want it to move a little bit more efficiently, where, you know what, the money on the coast might be great. It's the same color as the money here, by the way, but it does do different things, and it's your company's decision there. But your company should have the ability to check out both, and it should have the wherewithal, and the investors currently sitting on your cap table should also know that and be able to help you, which again should drive things faster. It should make things a little bit more efficient. And then we're not, you know, hopefully the Midwest is competing over rounds one day. I mean, I think that's a great thing to happen, but you know, we don't have a lot of sharp elbows here. Like we really try to make the money go toward the best founders with what we're doing with our capital, right? Like, oh, this is a great, it's not necessarily, and again, nothing against the coast, but it's not necessarily like, oh, this is a unicorn in 3 years and we're going to put our knee on this neck and make sure that this founder hits these metrics. There are a lot of that's here, but it doesn't have to be the route that you go. And so I think high level, what we're trying to do is just make sure that everyone's aware of what's going on first, and that they know where to go and nobody's kind of lost in translation. I mean, this app is a great example of it, right? But there is innovation, there is entrepreneurship elsewhere. And I don't want entrepreneurs to have to move out of a market they don't like just because the funding's in one spot. Most of the customers are here in the Midwest, arguably. So the idea of just saying like, okay, well, again, we're just all in the virtual world. Hopefully travel opens up one day and we start meeting and that things will go back to normal. But even so, a plane ride's not that hard. And if I have an ecosystem out there that I could meet others, not just one startup, I could start to get pretty embedded here. And maybe I'm pretty favorable to the local ecosystem because I'm the only outside party looking here too. So I don't know if it answers your question fully, but I just hope that the industry and the problems that we're trying to address, they eliminate themselves over time. I'm just hopeful that OmniValley can speed it up a little bit.
Yeah. And I think there's a ton of value around syndication. I know at the 3 venture funds I worked with, it was all about syndication, structuring deals across the country to make sure that we can support those companies in the best way. And I think that's critical. I flashed forward to like, what do you think the future is? But I do want to stay in where we are now. So tell us a little bit of like, what does the traditional process for a limited partner or an investor looking to access new markets look like now versus with OmniValley?
Sure. Real quick on syndicates, because I think that was a good question. I think that world will take off. It already kind of has. For those unaware, go check out Assure, go check out like AngelList can create these pretty easily, but these syndicate networks that make it available for, with the new SEC regulations on accreditation, it's like you and I, Eric, could have a pretty powerful syndicate on a network if we started one. So I think you'll see venture and startup company investment take off in that way, which should. We're never going to be afraid of competition. I think, worst case scenario, the OmniValley dies, but the venture industry is exactly where we want it to be. I consider that a win too, because there are other people doing this, but the syndication thing is like, oh, it's very deal flow focused. That's not our game. But I do think that's going to draw in a lot of kind of younger capital, or it makes investments a little bit easier where we don't have to play with stocks. We could actually play with younger companies, and liquidity strategies could get us in and out. So I think that's the future. That wave is coming. But back to answer your question process-wise, LinkedIn is a pretty useful tool up until a point. And then once you're, big enough, and I say big enough, once you're connected enough where people are coming to you, you have a pretty insular network that you built. Like Eric, you and I chat. I consider you in that realm, and we can talk about funds and startups. But I reach out to a lot of other funds. Obviously, the platform, people talk to me. And so you start to grow your network very organically and slowly. It's always slowly, or you're kind of like, ooh, or if you're a startup, it's like, okay, I want to talk to the Drive Capital folks. It's like, all right, well, Chris is pretty hard to get a hold of. Good luck with that email. And he's going to take some soft intros. But he's very active in the space, and he obviously will take intro and things, but it just does take soft intros, obviously, and I use him as an example, but most are the same, right? And rightfully so, you want to guard your email because you don't want to be spammed by a million folks. Because once you're a big fund and a big name or well-connected, it's like, they must have money. I need to talk to them now. It's like, no, not always the case. And so the connections on the LP to GP side, I think, are relatively easy. LPs kind of sit at a different level, or at least we think for some reason, but we sit at a different level because we're the ones with the money. VC funds will reach out. We can develop a portfolio that way and start to get our connections, go to annual meetings and start to meet other LPs. But we don't really do that anymore, at least travel wise. And so LPs to GPs, I think, was always going to be okay because GPs have to do that to survive, right? VC funds have to reach out to us to survive. But on the startup side and on the venture to startup side, a lot of different deal flow networks out there, a lot of different kind of co-investor networks that are there. Like there are funds that only invest in benchmark companies, right? They're the next round after benchmark. That's a pretty good model. Benchmark does a pretty good job. So why go anywhere else? We're not for them. But a lot of funds that are newer, that are spinning out, or younger or emerging managers or brands, whatever we want to call them, is they do need those connections, and they need them fast, and they need to get past, okay, LinkedIn, this guy went to Harvard and Yale, or she's up in Chicago today. It's like, great, that's what you can get there. But at least on our platform, it'll tell you if they'll lead around, if they'll be a co-investor, if they write checks in certain ranges. And so to answer your question, I don't think, and maybe like Clubhouse and like Lunch Club or Lunch, whatever that other one's called, like the connection platforms out there can be helpful. But I want ours to be pretty granular, and I want ours to be specific to the venture industry and kind of own that market on the connection side and not the data side. And so I think a lot of data platforms, connections, but up until now, before OmniValley, really is closed insular networks. Get to know a new fund, great. Get to know a new fund. Maybe they become, a relationship down the road. You invest in a company that had previous investors. They're now co-investors. You're probably going to get to know them. So slow moving, organic, and just kind of the flow of the ecosystem, which I also think is important too, because as a limited partner, questions we ask, like, who are the co-investors? Like, who are you connected with, especially for early stage folks? Because great, you wrote a $500,000 check. Where's this company going to go? And do you have connections there? I want them to have every connection, like every access to all of them, not necessarily how it works. And I don't think it'll be that way in the foreseeable future, but OmniValley does give them a tool to actually open up some connections and to start having conversations and decide for themselves if this is a decent market or a decent investor to pursue in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to circle back and ask you about the kind of adding to the future again, the OmniValley intelligence. We talked about transparency and how critical that'll be. We talked about some of the reports that you plan to generate down the line. But I do like this really kind of tracking and visualization tool and the data input piece that you're building out. So I'm going to circle back to that in just 1 second. But we're about halfway through our regularly scheduled programming. So it's that time again where I shamelessly plug that you can go directly to netcapital.com and search OmniValley, or go to netcapital.com/companies/OmniValley, and you can learn more. You can click push button invest. There's also a bit of a Q&A section there if we can't get to your questions. I also want to remind everybody that the Q&A functionality in Zoom is wide open. Please continue to ask your questions there. We do want to keep this as interactive as possible. I can hang out with Grady on my own time, but this really is for potential investors. So please do come on in. With that being said, I do want to circle us back, as I foreshadowed, into this OmniValley intelligence, and then let's go into revenue model, market size, exit strategy, all those classic good things that investors want to know. But please tell me a little bit about this OmniValley intelligence. What do you plan to do with that?
Yeah, so thoughtfully named by our tech side, and we'll figure that out. But I look at it as, so this was the pre-virtual world kind of mock-ups. So everything obviously changed a little bit when the virtual world happened, and we're here to support the investors. What matters most to them is the exposure for the portfolio companies. So that's the next iteration here that should launch soon. But the OmniValley intelligence thing is, I think, a big winner for us because, again, I don't do a lot with startup companies other than helping them and connecting them to folks like you, Eric, and other funds on the platform. But that side's never been open. We're an investor connections platform. So what we're looking at with OmniValley Intelligence, again, strictly for the investors, upload your portfolio company, Excel download, whatever is easiest for them is what we're going to have. Most of them track their portfolios in some capacity, whether it's Google Docs or something. But if you have portfolio company or download it from Carta, whatever investors use, pour that into OmniValley. There's a portfolio company space. Right now it's all manual inputs, so we don't ask people to do that, and hence why we'll have the startup side. But once startup companies are on there and we can input them, we'll ask for a few lines of information that obviously can be edited, but that'll go into that co-investor mapping, which we call OmniValley Intelligence. So for people to think about it, Eric and Grady have a venture fund. We're in South Dakota. We have 3 portfolio companies that we've just recently invested in. We like food and beverage, and we like agriculture, but we also have one that's off thesis just because, we invest how we invest. And so we have one in the AI space. What we could do on a platform like this is like, okay, yes, I need exposure for my companies that'll live separate and apart, but I'm going to plug in my portfolio to the OmniValley intelligence system. And what it's going to do is talk to all of the other members in their portfolios over time and try to see like, okay, your 3 companies here, looks like 2 matched our database. Again, just based on the easily inputted metrics. And this is the route these companies in a very similar space went. So food and beverage, like Eat Street here in Madison, delivery, they're not DoorDash, Grubhub. These are the routes DoorDash and Grubhub went. They are unique, but Eat Street took a very unique route here in Wisconsin and were able to go through an accelerator locally. They had local funding from a venture fund. So if you're in a smaller market, there are routes to take. And I think, again, it's more for the investors to see. But what I think is interesting is that you could plug in a company, see routes of other companies, Crunchbase, like think similar companies, but you got to click on them. You got to go through their investors and see those routes. We're going to map all of that out, and it's going to show by stage and by investment round with the members that are on the platform. So now, Eric, you're Net Capital, and Net Capital, you run your own fund, and I have one. I plug in my companies. They hit some of your marks too from years ago when you were running your fund. It's like, hey, Eric, is this still your thesis? Like, I have one that needs a Series A check. I know you're in the Series C space, but do you know folks in this area, because your company matches almost to a T what mine does a little years later, but that kind of thing. Or again, in real time, current time, you could have companies kind of mirroring one another too. So I think the co-investor, again, it's all for the exposure and for the connections, but I think you map those out in a way that makes it real time and accessible based on inputted data from the members and the portfolio companies to say, okay, here's some routes that they could actually go. Let's entertain these first before opening up the door for every introduction kind of thing. More guided for less sophisticated investors or investors that don't have the time to go out and navigate for that next round.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing about OmniValley Intelligence. And I know I do want to get to the traction that you have so far. You are in market. You have people using quite a few people using the product. So I do want to dive into that in just a moment. But before that, we have some questions coming in. So given that Net Capital is in the same general space, pretty broadly speaking, I think. But what are the synergies there, or are there also any conflicts?
Yeah, so our intentions are to destroy Net Capital in every sense of no, so I look at you guys, and we had talked about this, Eric, originally, because we went through, and for those on the phone, like we went to Seed Invest, we went to Republic, we went to Micro Ventures. Our network is not high net worth angels. We thought this should be accessible for everyone. High net worth angels are on the site, but that's where Net Capital's network lies. But Net Capital is more crowdfunding, but also connections. We're strictly connections in this industry, more of a vertical of LinkedIn than we are of the Republics or Seed Invest that I would label Net Capital under. I think what you guys do is very interesting up front and after the fact, and the ability to kind of navigate. It's like, well, angels don't have to pay us fees to raise this round, like kind of thing. And so, and again, we had talked about that and the reasons why we went with each other. Obviously, we're a little dissimilar than a lot of the other companies on your site, too, in a smaller raise. So not only are we grateful, but I think it's a good test case that like, okay, there are things that are happening in the Midwest. Eric, you're from Michigan, again, not holding it against you, but you're Midwest at least. And so I think we spoke the same language, but for who asked the question, that's crowdfunding. They move money on the site as a licensed broker dealer. We do not intend to do that. And I guess maybe you're not a broker dealer, Eric, but the way
money portable, yeah, got it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the way because the way you operate is unique, but we don't ever intend to do that. People ask us all the time, and your point on syndicates, it's like, well, you should let us create syndicates. And it's like, that encourages groupthink. I'm nothing against it, but I've been preaching against it for so long. And a lot of these other platforms, it's like, great, you have a lot of members, but it's controlled by some pretty large syndicates that actually only invest in the coast. So it's not like AngelList doesn't work. It just also contributes to those statistics on there. And so long story short, I mean, we want to be connections. If it takes 10 handshakes to make a deal or to invest in a company, let's get rid of 2 or 3 or 4 of them, not all of them. I think Net Capital does a very good job of getting rid of all of them with the detail and everything that you guys have. So, but yeah, again, we're not an investment platform. We don't move money that way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I appreciate that feedback. And I think one of the things that really I identified so strongly with in OmniValley is the incredible emphasis on transparency. And that's where Net Capital comes from too. We think you should have all the information you need to make an investment decision. We think you should be able to engage and interact. Like that's what these Q&As are for. So I think that's one thing that really resonated. And of course, we think being able to invest online does grant access to capital and access to investments to all people, not just in the United States, internationally on the investment side, not just on the coast, in the Midwest as well, and of course the South and everywhere else as well. So I think we kind of just like see eye to eye on granting more access to more people in terms of investing and getting invested in. So great question, and thanks for that feedback, Grady. It's been a pleasure to work with you.
Well, and I think too, Eric, what you guys do very well, and kind of how we see it, it's like you need trusted virtual networks specifically in today's world, and you need the built infrastructure to kind of cultivate those networks. So it's great when we used to travel and we still have smaller calls, and I forget what it's like to hold a call just because we have to do face-to-face for everything, but that might not go away for a while. So if OmniValley can be kind of that trusted partner or that outsourced provider of connections in a way, like, again, it's helped us in our messaging, and most importantly, it's helped our members in the VC space. But I think that is what Net Capital does too. Like, you guys are very transparent. That's what we want to be. We give everyone the tools to be as transparent as they choose, but the platform is built to be, okay, it's vetted, it's trusted, they have infrastructure here. Now let's build my virtual network and keep it here, take it offline, do whatever you want to do. But this is a place that we can use here and going forward.
Yep, absolutely. And so back to one thing I wanted to alluded to, and I wanted to follow up on is traction so far. So you have a pretty sizable amount of portfolio companies already listed, funds already listed. There are members in a whole bunch of different markets. Can you tell us a little bit about that traction so far?
Yeah, I smile because it confuses me at times too. Because I look at us as we're currently like a directory, right? Like the tools and the functionalities that are being built, we've well outlined them and they are being built. But right now it's a place where they can go. Like the map is there. It shows people location if they list it. You can get as specific as you want. You can just enter a zip code if you don't want people to know exactly what building. I don't think that's happening a lot these days anyway. But if I wanted to go knock on Eric's door, you could do that if you really wanted to. But so the map kind of shows everything. I think it's more gimmicky, but the map shows everyone located in the space, whether they're an angel investor, whether they're a fund, and then startups will be on there soon as well. But the member list is where you can go and actually, same filters, but you can actually go and get pretty granular there. And I think to your question, traction wise, that's where we see most people using it. And they just go to profile and they hit the connect button, or they just click the email because the email just pop up in their link. Again, we're there to house, not to move anything. So it's your networks. We're just there to help curate some things. And again, exposure, transparent access. But yeah, we have, today, I think I like to count the fully filled out profiles. I think there's 800 some members, but we have 500 some fully filled out profiles that are more active because they had to at least sign in again. And we have, I think, not exact numbers, but over 100 different investor to investor connections. So these are two different groups, however you want to count that. And then good number of daily active users, which again, I find surprising at this stage. I invite everyone to go in there and search and teeter with it because there are new members joining all the time. But traction wise, yeah, we count the connections and then we count who's logged in and how often they're using it. But again, it's the email functionality, it's clicking on the profiles, and it's actually zooming in and out on the map and seeing things is where we see the majority of clicks happen today. We do have a benefits and partner section that's growing. We haven't really marketed that super well, purposely so. And then company promotions we have right now, but those will kind of go away as the startup side takes on. So as far as traction, I mean, we look at, like I said, the member connections are the most important to us. I think that's what we consider as success. But it's interesting to look at the trends too. So it's mostly coastal firms connecting to the Midwest, or I should say any other market, or it's individual markets connecting within themselves, which I find also interesting. It's, I need to meet this person in Chicago. Chicago's big, right? But I need to meet this. I didn't even know this firm was there. It's like, yeah, meet them. Let's hope that they were honest and they're actually in Chicago. Like we vet, but we can't tell if you lie on your LinkedIn profile. It's a bold move. But most of them have told the truth, right? And we have a few bad actors on there, if any. But yeah, trend data on like Tel Aviv and where they connect. We have some groups that are in Africa actually, and what they want is a little bit unique and different than what a lot of the U.S. firms think about. And then Toronto is kind of a fun market. So there's just the movement of who's connecting where, like India to Australia, India to Asia, and India now to like the Midwest more so because they were always Silicon Valley. And I think the platform, I don't know if the platform has made it easier or it's certainly easier, but I don't know if it's made them want to do that. But it's definitely telling where they're clicking and with the members that they're going after. So I think it's helpful from a trend perspective, just for us selfishly, just to kind of learn where people are connecting. And it keeps, our finger on the pulse of the industry. But biggest thing we track is the member to member connections. All those metrics will obviously be put in place once this final build is launched. So, but that's how we define kind of the success or the traction today is, are they able to connect and do they? And that's been positive.
Yeah. Grady, I think I appreciate how self-effacing you are. That was the most Midwest thing that's ever happened on these Zoom calls was you discounted the not completely filled out profiles. That is like so incredibly Midwest. I loved every second of that. But before I let you comment on that, because I know we only have a little bit of time left, I want to get to this question coming in from Q&A. What is the plan to grow participation on the platform? I hadn't heard of OmniValley until I got the email about this session. Seemed interesting, so I dialed in to learn more. So what does the customer acquisition strategy look like for you, Grady?
Sure. So right now, and rightfully so, nothing against you or your networks. The person who asked the question, we're not great at marketing this yet, and we've grown it purposefully organically so we can get feedback from these members. A lot of it's word of mouth, a lot of it's invites from others, which has been good. But growth strategy wise, I mean, we want to utilize, like we'll have some advertisement spend in this next raise, and we'll utilize LinkedIn. We've done a couple of those in the past. They've worked really well. We also have larger groups that we intend to work with. They have some high price points that we'll navigate, but the Angel Capital Association obviously has a large following. We're familiar with that group. The family office networks that are out there, they're just again, they're pretty insular today, and purposely so. And if you want to market to them, you need money to get in a pamphlet, and we're going to try to go around that because I don't think it benefits that network or us to do that. But LinkedIn, there's some reads that institutional investors have that we have connections to those publications. Again, we just have been kind of purposefully not marketing this out there. It's not like the platform can't handle it, but until it's out there and what I like to say operating on its own, we like to pinpoint certain folks and groups, and we send out emails and everything, and we have that chain working, but really targeting venture funds that we know kind of hold weight in certain areas. angel groups, different markets is how we'll do it, by location. So if you're an accredited individual, it can be pretty tough for us just to market that out there or get that message, because those emails are hard to find, especially if you're not on other platforms. And nor do we want to be scraping emails from things. It's not really our game either. So how we'll acquire customers, again, we'll have, it'll be gamified in a way where you can invite others, word of mouth. We'll do some LinkedIn spend, because I think that's our core target audience, and then start to leverage some of these larger groups that have built networks. I think our messaging just needs to be more clear for those folks. It's like, we're not here to take away any of your membership dues or fees. We're here, if they are interested in venture capital and startup companies or other markets, send them our way. And so that has been admittedly tough. We get kind of stonewalled there, but it doesn't keep us from revisiting them. It doesn't keep us from annoying them. So we're going to continue to work those strategies. But yeah, you'll see some, up LinkedIn spend, you'll see some more members pop in there, but we still average close to 30 or 40 new ones a month through just some pretty minimal email campaigns. But it's a good question. We do intend that to take off with existing groups that are in the market.
Mm-hmm. And for those who aren't as familiar as I am with the product, with the platform, can you tell us a little bit about your revenue model?
Well, so I say the word purposely a lot because we're another Midwest thing. I'm sure you'll make fun of me for, Eric, but we are purposely not generating revenue. And we're doing that so we can grow the member base. I look at it like we are a very real storefront with a lock on the door. And so once you're in, because it's a vetted platform, right? Once you're in there, my ethos, and hopefully we won't eat these words, but the mingling and the connections, those should be free. Like anything on the platform, free, which really elicits itself to the freemium premium model. In the store, down the road, in the store, we can throw things on the shelves like the benefits and partners we have revenue sharing with. We can do some event promotions or event hosting. We'll have communication channels and some forums available that can kind of drum up more communication and connections. And those things could be one-off. And that's kind of what's built. But the only thing we're modeling today and what's seen on Net Capital is the subscription. And so in this near term, revenue is going to come from in 2021. It's going to come from the startup company side, which doesn't ever feel good to say because startups don't have any money. But we are not expecting a tremendously large cost. I mean, the thing we have built in for the highest tier is $30 a month, and that's more consultative. It'll walk them through the platform because we have some learnings to do on our side from the startup side. But an exposure to a network like this does warrant the cost of Spotify or Netflix a month. And I think if we can keep our costs minimal, lock them in for a couple of months, really educate them that this is more for exposure and your connections. You don't have to be raising to do this. That's something that startups have a hard time with. And then if you want to pay more and you want access to the investor side, they'll never see the contact information. Again, two-way mirror for you guys as investors. But if you're a startup, then we can walk you through it. We can talk through who might be the best routes to go. We can start to facilitate soft intros. Again, if the investor side's interested, no promises to the startup, but it allows for them, if I am raising, if I have a couple of weeks here, let's go all in on this. Kind of like what you guys do, Eric, with your distributions and how pointed you guys can get. Very similar in structure. But again, revenue, the model on the investor side is we will turn that on. We expect a pretty large churn. And so we're being conservative with our numbers and making sure that we hit a member base because it's only as important as the number of members we have and the quality. And then the startup side, we'll start to generate some initial revenue from them and really start to prove out that connection side in the soft intro. But freemium premium subscription model kind of across the board is what we'd say is our business model.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the kind of the granular approach and explaining that for our potential investors on the line here. I'm going to wrap up in about 5 minutes. I'm giving you a heads up, Grady, that in about 5 minutes, I'll welcome you in for closing remarks. That'll be an opportunity to share why the people listening right now on Clubhouse and on Zoom should go directly to Net Capital right now and invest, and why now's the time. But before we get there, I want to make sure that we get some details around the market size and how you think about that for potential investors. So tell us a little bit about how you view the market and what that size looks like.
Sure. So briefly, because I know I have long-winded answers, Eric. But 8,000 plus VC funds. Market's growing too, which is a good thing. So we don't really look at the market today. We look at the market and what it's going to be a couple of years from now when we think that this is bigger. But 8,000 VC funds today, 5,000 some accelerator programs, 2,000 angel groups and family offices out there, 1,500 limited partners, corporate venture offices, not to mention the innovation groups or the ecosystem builders that are in markets. And then whoever has an accurate number on accredited individuals these days, no idea, but let's say Google search 4 million. And then the startup company side, obviously, globally, we see close to like 300 million startups started every year. We are in no way promoting just that these are going to be vetted portfolio companies. It's where we're going to start. But I think that the market opens up once the platform can weed a lot of that stuff out. For better perspective, again, like I said, 20% of that total addressable market is actually in these big coastal markets. So the majority are elsewhere. And I should say that's US based. Those numbers were global, but in the US, just in the US, there's a lot that deserve the exhibition and the exposure, like I said, specifically globally as well. And then dollar wise, since people like to talk about it, again, conservative, freemium, average subscription models, 200 million plus a year for investor members, 5 billion, 6 billion plus on the startup member side. Again, that's total market share. So we can do the math on that, but market's big, it's sizable, it's always growing. I'm happy that it's always growing. There's no shortage of new ideas and innovation being spun up. And I think the platform at some level can handle the idea phase all the way to much, much later stage startups and on the investor side too. So there shouldn't really be this kind of lull in activity unless, economic factors kick in, but market's big, it's growing.
And that's pretty much exactly what I would expect to hear from somebody with your pedigree and your background. I mean, you obviously you come from venture, you are a limited partner, you invest yourself, you're building a product to serve your own kind of personal needs. So I think that's kind of a special space to be in. So as promised, and I'm going to try something new next time where we actually allow Clubhouse to ask a question. We're not there yet. We're trying. We're excited that we've gotten this far, trying something new. So I'm not going to throw that wrinkle in today, but. With these last couple of minutes, Grady, why don't you come in here and tell us why now is the perfect time to go directly to netcapital.com and search OmniValley and invest?
Because what else are we doing these days? It sounds like it's, I would say, if you're an investor looking for a company investment, I think our model's there. I think we have industry leaders that are on our side. I think that the company's in a good spot to, like I said, we went through an accelerator program, we're organized, picked up a couple of advisors. I think from an investment perspective, we have a much better sense of where the company is going, specifically on the revenue route, which is what folks should care about from an investment perspective. On an economic development perspective, I mean, what we're doing at OmniValley and why we're trying to build it and asking for those who support it is for those who, have companies or investors in their market so they can access untapped and unique ecosystems. So we're going to curate soft introductions. If you need heightened exposure for yourself or your firm or your portfolio companies or even local opportunities that you're working with, this is a vetted network that can get them there. We want to launch the startup company profiles. So again, that two-way mirror. So startups and all of the local folks that you guys know and work with can get to connections faster and more efficiently, whether or not they're raising. And then that kind of leads into our last point for funds in the room or for those considering maybe a marketing budget. It's like we really do want to be the outsourced relations platform to the growing OmniValley investor base. So if you think about like virtual world, Eric, you guys do a good job spending on marketing, promoting companies, not super dissimilar from funds or for insular networks and how they get companies out there or newsletters. I have 10,000 newsletters that we're subscribed to these days that all talk about their companies. And so if we could curate that in a way where it's based on my preferences, I don't care which newsletter it's coming from, that's a lot of those outsourced relation tools that we're going to be able to grow. And so we ask, further reach, more exposure. If it's a platform that you think deserves to get built, we ask you to support us financially. Reach out anytime. We're happy to hear about what's going on in your market. And, it's a connection platform, so always be there to help. And I think the ability for us to kind of sit in the middle, learn from our members, learn from the startups, and connect all parties involved is is super important for us. It's the driving motivation behind what we do. And so we're asking for like-minded folks to really take the time, look at our profile, make sure it's a smart investment for you, obviously. And if you want to be an owner with us, we invite you to join. And like I said, if you want to hear more from me, reach out anytime. Eric laughs because I talk too much. But if you guys ever, like I said, you can talk about this all day. It's our world, it's our life. And we're happy to be here building something that I think could be very helpful in the future.
No, Grady. No, I think you talk exactly the right amount. And look at us, we have 3 minutes to spare. So I don't know how you could possibly think you talk too much. Well, so thanks again. I think that concludes our scheduling. Actually, let me look at my notes. I know I have some housekeeping here. Yes, of course. Thanks so much, Grady, for those closing remarks. Thanks you for all of our attendees for stopping by, listening in, and engaging in the Q&A. As always, this has been recorded. You can go directly to Net Capital's YouTube channel. I just added a link to the, I don't know why that, I just added a link to the chat where you can click that link and go directly to our YouTube channel. This will be uploaded shortly. And so you can see anything that you might have missed if you came late. And of course, please do share liberally so that more people can see this, consume this content, and learn about OmniValley. That concludes my housekeeping items. Thank you so much for the attendees. Grady, always a pleasure hanging out with you. Thanks for coming on.
Yep, Eric, anytime. I appreciate you doing this.
All right. Well, take care, everyone. Thank you.